For as long as most of us can remember, China was the factory for the world's clothes. Period. But that entire era, it's over. And we're not just talking about a little dip here. We're talking about a rapid, systemic collapse. All right, let's get right into it.
And look, we've got to be super clear about this. What's happening in China's apparel industry, it's not just a recession. It's not some downturn that'll bounce back. The source material for this whole analysis calls it a structural collapse. That means a fundamental breakdown, something that might not ever recover from.
So, that's the billion-dollar question, right? How? How did the world's factory, this absolute giant that seemed unstoppable, the very engine of fast fashion, how did it get to this point, a point of no return?
Well, it all starts with the one thing the entire industry was built on. For years, the formula was just dead simple. Make stuff as cheap as you possibly can and make a ton of it. That whole model, it's completely shattered.
Okay, take a look at this. What's so wild here is how everything is completely flipped on its head. I mean, every single thing that made the old model work has been replaced by its total opposite. Cheap labor? Nope. Now it's rising labor costs. Mass production, fueled by global brands? Well, those brands are running for the exits. That predictable supply chain? Gone. Replaced by total chaos with regulations. And that booming market at home? Yeah, that's shrinking fast.
So let's really dig into those four killers. First up, labor costs. They've just exploded. We're talking costs in China's manufacturing hubs are now higher than in places like Vietnam and Bangladesh. That just erases their main advantage right there. Second, you've got these sudden out-of-the-blue regulations on things like the environment and taxes. It made costs totally unpredictable, a huge risk. Third, you've got the big global brands. They started looking around and thinking, you know, with all the geopolitical stuff and worries about our designs being stolen, maybe we should move. And they did. And finally, the engine at home just sputtered out. Youth unemployment is sky high, and people just aren't spending money.
But here's the thing. This wasn't just about outside forces. There was another, just as powerful problem tearing the industry apart from the inside. And that was a massive and honestly, a really destructive change in the Chinese consumer. You know, it's crazy to think that just a few years back, the big thing for young people in cities was vanity consumption. It was all about spending money to look good, buying brands. That has done a complete 180. The mindset today, it's ultra cost saving. Every single penny is counted. Every purchase has to be the absolute best value. Yeah, this new consumer is just brutally pragmatic. Their incomes aren't growing, so they're incredibly sensitive to price. They're chasing these super fast social media trends that might literally be popular for a week, which is a nightmare for companies trying to manage inventory. Brand loyalty? Forget it. It's all about what the Japanese call kosupa, cost performance, getting the absolute most bang for your buck. So spending big on clothes is out, saving or investing is in, and you can imagine what that does to profit margins. It just crushes them.
So you've got economic problems, you've got a total shift in society, and then, on top of all that, you have a series of government policies that basically acted like gasoline on the fire. It turned a slow decline into an absolute nosedive. The source here calls them self-inflicted wounds, and that's exactly what they were.
And you have to look at the order these happened in because it's key. First, zero COVID. The lockdowns just destroyed global trust. Buyers couldn't rely on China anymore, so they left. Permanently. Then came common prosperity, which went after the rich. Well, that killed the luxury market, which was where all the high profit margins were. After that, the internal circulation policy was supposed to help local brands, but it just made them weaker and less competitive. And the final blow? A financial squeeze on small and medium-sized businesses. The government cut off loans, and that bankrupted the huge network of small factories that were the real backbone of the whole industry. So you put all of that together, the economic issues, the consumer shift, the policy mistakes, and you're left with one really unavoidable conclusion. This is not a temporary dip. All the evidence is pointing to the fact that this decline is permanent. It's structural. And it's so important we understand what structural end actually means. This isn't your typical business cycle. You know, a dip that's going to bounce back. No, this is a permanent, irreversible change. It's caused by these deep fundamental shifts in demographics, the economy, and China's whole place in the world.
And there are a few huge, irreversible problems that make any kind of recovery seem, well, pretty much impossible. For one, demographics. You have fewer young people, which means a smaller workforce and less demand for fashion. Two, that world's factory crown, it's gone, and it's not coming back. Production has moved. And finally, without that cheap labor advantage, all the other weaknesses are exposed, like weak branding and a totally destructive e-commerce scene where everyone is just racing to the bottom on price and quality. It's just destroyed profitability.
Right, so when you have an industrial collapse this huge,
It doesn't just stay in the business section of the newspaper. It was always going to spill over and become a major question of political stability.
And just to be really clear, what we're doing here is what the source calls a safe analysis. The goal is to look at the institutional risks that pop up from this economic mess. We're not trying to make some big, bold political prediction, just laying out the chain of events.
But you could pretty easily trace the domino effect here. It starts with mass factory closures that leads directly to local jobs just vanishing and youth unemployment going through the roof. Okay, so what happens next? Local governments lose all that tax money, which means they have to cut public services. And the last domino to fall, the public starts to lose trust that the government can deliver the economic growth it always promised.
So what you end up with is this incredible tug of war. On one side, you've got all these things creating instability, rising unemployment, businesses failing left and right. But on the other side, the state has some incredibly powerful tools for control. We're talking about massive surveillance systems, total control over the media, the power to whip up nationalism whenever it's needed, and the ability to hand out targeted economic relief. That's why the final outcome here is so uncertain. So, to wrap it all up, the key takeaway is that this was a perfect storm. It wasn't just one thing. It was four massive forces all converging at the exact same time. The low-cost advantage just evaporated. The consumer completely changed their behavior, a series of policies backfired spectacularly, and you have these deep, structural problems like demographics that you just can't fix. All of that together is what brought this entire industrial era to a close.
And that leaves all of us with a really critical question, not just for China, but for the entire global economy. This massive engine of production is basically shutting down. But, the world still needs its t-shirts and jeans made somewhere. So as one world's factory closes its doors for good, where's the next one going to open?